Alright, so we've already learned about cum causal clauses, where you can use cum and translate it as a conjunction as because or although, but there are a couple other kinds of cum clauses. So we need to talk about what other kinds of cum clauses there are and how to distinguish between different types of clauses. So, once again, cum causal, this is what you've already seen. Cum as a subordinating conjunction with the subjunctive most commonly does mean because or since. That's why you were taught that first. So you always try and default to this when you see cum in a subjunctive as your first translation. And then after this, you can go to some of the other options that we're going to talk about today. Just remember, cum causal, that's the first thing you go to. All right, there's also cum clauses that we call temporal clauses. And a cum temporal clause takes the indicative. So cum plus the indicative is translated as when, and it just tells us the general time something happened. So, if you see cum, it's inside a cum clause, but instead of a subjunctive verb, it has an indicative verb, always just translate as when. It's a pretty simple rule. Remember that rule, cum plus the indicative, translated as when. Alright, now this is where it gets a little trickier. Because when cum takes a subjunctive, it can be translated two other ways. It can be translated as although, and this type of cum clause is called a cum concessive clause. Normally, when you have one of these clauses, you're going to have a word that helps you understand that it's definitely concessive, because there could be some confusion between a clause meaning because or a clause meaning although. So often these are marked by a word like tamen in the main clause, right? Tamen can mean nevertheless. And that can help show us that we're actually looking at a cum concessive clause. A cum clause with the subjunctive can also be translated as when. Now, note, I'm teaching you these cum circumstantial clauses you won't see these in your textbook. Eleanor Dickey teaches you a rule, and she says, well, this is a general rule that doesn't really hold true. You should check out the footnote in this chapter. And she doesn't even talk about this, but I think it's important that you're at least exposed to the idea that a cum clause with the subjunctive can also be translated as when. And so we have to talk about the difference between a cum temporal clause, which tells us a specific exact point of time, and a cum circumstantial clause, which gives us the general set of circumstances or ideas where something is occurring, of what is occurring when an action occurred. So let's give you a better example. I like this example because it's pretty specific. So if we look at this, an example to help explain this, right? Columbus discovered America when he was seeking a new route to India. So here, the when clause is not defining or dating the time of discovery. It tells us the general circumstances of when this occurred. Columbus, when he was doing this general thing, trying to find a route to India, he discovered America. Right? So that's one example of how these cum circumstantial clauses could be used. I'll show you another example in a second. But let's talk about how to translate these clauses first. So here's some steps. When you see a cum clause, you've got cum and it's followed by a nominative or accusative. Typically, you know it's not a preposition. You know it's going to be one of these conjunctions. How do you figure out whether it means when, whether it means although, or whether it means because or since? So, a couple steps. Number one, is the main verb in the clause in the indicative or subjunctive? If it's indicative, it's a temporal clause. It just means when. We're done. It's super simple. Step two, if you've got a subjunctive inside your cum clause, always default to because or since. Translated that way, does it make sense when translated that way? All right, now that you think maybe it makes sense, it probably is a cum causal clause, double check. Is there a word like tamen in the main sentence? If there's a certain keyword, it might help us determine that it's actually cum concessive and means although. If there's not a keyword, because or since makes sense, just go with because or since. If, finally, step 4, you've translated because, that doesn't make sense, although makes no sense whatsoever, that's when you can go to the final one. Maybe it's cum circumstantial and is just giving us the general idea of when something happened. Let's look at a couple Latin senses. So here's 3, right? Cum mater abest, puer timet. All right. Puer timet, the boy fears. Cum mater abest, all right? Abest, third singular present active indicative. We just got an indicative inside our cum clause, so when the mother is gone, the boy fears. General set of rules. We're done. Cum, temporal. It's an indicative. Next sentence. Cum mater absit, tamen puer non timet. So we'll start with our main clause, always. Tamen, nevertheless, the boy does not fear. Cum mater absit. Alright, absit is definitely third singular present subjunctive active. So it could be because the mother is gone, nevertheless the boy does not fear. Or it can mean although the mother is absent or is gone, nevertheless the boy does not fear. So you'll think of that for a second. Well, although certainly makes more sense. So we'd go with although. We have tamen pointing out this is nevertheless pushing us towards this concessive although feel. It makes sense as although. We'll go with although. Alright, let's look at the final one. Cum mater absit puer timet. Alright, so once again, the boy fears. Cum mater absit. Alright, third singular present subjunctive active again, so it could be because or since or although. So once again, we'll go to those. Because or since is always our default, we'll just go there. Because the mother is absent or gone, the boy fears. Well, that makes perfect sense. We don't even need to go any further. We'll always default to cum causal. So, cum circumstantial, if I wanted to give you an example of that, a good example of something like that would be when Caesar was emperor, the boy was afraid of dogs. Right? We have a general set of circumstances. When this general thing was happening, the boy was afraid of dogs. It exists a general set of circumstances that isn't an exactly defined time, and the main clause is somewhat distant in purpose from the subordinate clause. And that's it. Simple as that. Remember, basic default, always default to cum causal. It'll make it a lot easier for you.